You're listening to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Cruikshank. Our podcast brings you information and resources to enhance the therapeutic effects of your practice based on a deeper understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the integration of modern science and research with traditional practices and experiences. Join me and my co-hosts, Rachel Land and Katya Barch, as we dive into all things yoga, research, and wellness.
We are back, and I'm really excited about this one. This one, I feel like we have a lot less maybe specific preparations for, but I think it's going to bring up some really interesting discussions. And I think leadership is such a really interesting topic for yoga teachers, and I mean the larger world as well, even if you're not a yoga teacher. And I love this one too because I feel like you, Rachel, you bring a good perspective. You've been with me for so long now and working closely with me on a lot of projects. And I just feel like you have a really good insiders and outsiders perspective.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And it's something that's been kind of bubbling around in the back of my brain for a while, because I was kind of like most people shopping around for a 500-hour teacher training for ages. And so I thought a lot about what I wanted. And when I came across you, which wasn't quite yoga medicine yet, I knew exactly that this was what I was looking for. And it was partially the content, but it was just as much the approach. So yeah, I'm going to leave a little bit more to discuss about that later. But yeah, it has been bubbling around in the back of my mind since then of what I was looking for and how I knew when I found it, and what I really appreciate about the values of yoga medicine and the way that you do things.
And I think for me, like I've always been a very purpose-driven person, and I've never had any real traditional concrete background in business or marketing or leadership, really. For me, I've learned a lot from the last 30 years of building my own businesses and following my intuition, I guess. But there are a lot of things that are core to what I do that I think you've kind of put some nice ribbons on and like
hopefully
organized.
Hopefully.
You figured me out.
Yeah, well, hopefully, because I think in the yoga world, but maybe not just in the yoga world, I think we kind of get confused as to what leadership is. And it's either really clear directive communication, like I know how things are, I know how it is, I'm telling you how it is, here's my method, like here's the cookie cutter approach. And maybe a little bit more recently, there's a second school of thought, which is, I'm on the cutting edge of what's popular. I'm doing the thing that everyone's talking about right now. And I don't think either one of those are actually leadership, even though I do think people get confused, especially over that really confident and clear communication. And they think, well, that's a leader because that person knows how it is and they're telling me what to do. And there's a sort of attractiveness. We've spoken about this before where you're like, there's something quite calming about just being told what to do. Not for me. I don't like being told what to do, but I think sometimes for some people, there's a sense of, well, I can relax because they've got me.
I think there's something really calming about that. I mean, like even you look at Iyengar classes, which are very precise and formulaic and specific about alignment. And there's something wonderful and brilliant about that, but also, doesn't always work just right for every single person. And I think Iyengar aside, like that confidence is important in instilling that trust and kind of surrender to the process a bit sometimes. And you find it in every industry. Like you find it in the healthcare industry, you find it in the yoga industry. And I think that confidence is really important. However, I think if you work with people, especially in the yoga and healthcare industries, that it's just doesn't work that way. It's not that simple as like, here's exactly how you do the pose and it's going to work for everyone. It just doesn't. Anyone who's taught yoga long enough therapeutically to a large enough population of people, or any healthcare provider, same thing with medications, knows that, there's some techniques that work for a broad population or a broad majority of people, but there's always a big percentage that doesn't, or responds poorly, or doesn't have any response. And so To me, the confidence can be a little scary. Like, I think it's one of the things that makes me most nervous as a teacher trainer is when I see people who are overly confident or are
Hmm.
giving broad guarantees about the work that we do, a kind of cure-all curative language, because
Hmm.
it just ain't so, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
that's been my experience as well. Often there are averages, and this thing that tends to be helpful most of the time or for most people, but there's always a scenario where it isn't. And whenever I hear certainty, it I get the same response. It scares me too, because it's to me, it's just an indication that you haven't asked enough people questions. Like, you can teach in a group class and say, this will feel great for your knee. And if you have an environment where people don't back talk, you might believe that that has been true for every person you've ever taught. But if you have a class environment where people are encouraged to speak up, there's bound to be 1 in 10, 2 in 10, 3 in 10 who are like, oh, actually, that doesn't feel good for my knee, or that feels worse for my
Yeah.
knee. So the more people you talk to, the less sure you become around really simple rules like, this will be good for your knee, full stop, end of conversation.
Well, and I think in a group class you have to do that, but rather than saying like this will be good for your knee, this can be really helpful for the
Yeah.
knees, because
Soften your
again,
language.
everyone's going to be so different, and it's really what drew me. It really is the backbone of what I was learned, what I was taught in Chinese medicine and
Mm,
herbal medicine and nutrition is like it really depends on the person. Like, it is different in Western medicine because there are, certain protocols a lot of times that, especially with insurance, that are that are covered or that are,
mm,
mandatory to some extent. And when you look at Chinese medicine, it very much is more individualized, and I just feel that that is so important, and it's been so helpful working with my patients over the last 2 decades. And I just think it's so important to bring that into the yoga world because I think yoga is very similar.
mhm.
And, there's even in the best research study, there's still, a big percentage, a decent percentage of people who don't respond to any, the greatest treatments there are. And, it's like one man's medicine or one woman or what man's medicine, one person's medicine is another person's poison.
Mhm.
So under different conditions, different contexts, and even for one person at a different point in their life, the
Yes.
same thing can also not be neutral or have a negative impact.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that you've always been really good at communicating. Since my first exposure to yoga medicine, you've always been really comfortable leaving space for mystery, leaving space for the gray area, and deferring to experts. When you get a question that is more suited to somebody else in the room, I've seen you quite happily defer the answer for that question to that expert. And I think you're able to do that without sounding like, well, I don't know anything, nothing's true, I can't give you any advice whatsoever. You're able to say, look, generally this, or this can be helpful, but you always leave space for individual results vary, or latest research is now suggesting yada 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 yada. There's always room for, hey, things change and we don't always know for sure.
Right. And that's the
Mhm.
thing, is things are changing. What helped you last week might be different this week. And that's the beauty, I think, of yoga, is the listening.
Mhm.
And as a teacher, rather than give an ultimatum, or a cure all, it's our option then to invite them into the experiment, which is what
Mhm.
I really love to do. Even with my patients, it's a fine line too between instilling confidence, often with very specific protocols that you might be giving, whether that's how many times they come and see me, or yoga or other things they might be doing on their own, as well as leaving space for that mystery and like,
Mm.
hey, things can progress in several different ways. Just pay attention, let me know how it goes. So, instilling that awareness and empowering them to be proactive. It's why, you know, my very first patients really, from the very beginning, I've always used a lot of yoga and home remedies and things like to get my patients involved in their healthcare, because
Mhm.
I never wanted them to just be dependent on me. And I think,
Mhm.
with yoga too, it's like, well, we're pulling them into the conversation. It's not one of those things where we can just give them a medication and they can be on their way. They actually have to do some of the work. So I think when we draw them into that discovery, it, opens up a whole nother, I mean, you feel the same way as I do on all this stuff.
100%. Like, not only is it more accurate to get them involved and to gain their feedback and to modify your approaches based on that feedback, it's more effective because they're much more engaged. They're paying
Yeah.
attention. They're noting their responses that afternoon and the next day. And once people get involved in their own healing, it's a completely different experience from take two and call me in the morning sort of thing.
Right.
They're part of the process. Yeah.
And I think that in and of itself enhances body awareness because they're starting to pay attention. So it's starting to create more of that. And it also creates what I like to think of as like these healing maps. So as I'm drawing pictures of what might be going on inside, what it looks like, even if it's just like, did you feel that? Well, let's work on that. And have you focus on this and see how it goes. I'm giving them a healing map to go like, here's a guidepost. It's going to be interactive. We might need to switch to a different trail at certain points, but like,
here's
we're going
my current
down this healing path
hypothesis
together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see how it goes. Yeah. And you'd think that would leave students feeling less confident, but that definitely hasn't been my experience. My experience is me saying, this seemed to be helpful today. So let's continue on in this direction and see how you respond. Seems to make people more confident than if I'd said, doing bridge pose will fix your back or doing bridge pose will fix your knees. Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I think when we give those ultimatums and those cure-alls, we actually a lot of times lose trust with our clients. And I know I've experienced it early on in my career. I kind of fell into some of that trap with some of my patients and noticed how quickly the people who, for whatever reason, didn't respond, all of a sudden, the relationship is kind of broken a little bit because they trusted me and, clearly needed something else. And so, there's so much more to the human body. Even if you are a healthcare provider or a physician, like we rarely know for sure. Like you might have a strong intuitive sense. I've been seeing patients for 20 years now. And like, I have a pretty strong intuitive sense, but I'm smart enough to know now that there's always exceptions and you really never know how someone's going to respond until you start going down that path with them, whether that's how they're going to respond to surgery or acupuncture or yoga or breath work, like it is an open conversation regardless of what your strategies are really.
Yeah. I think that was a big part of what initially drew me to yoga medicine, that it wasn't, here are the 3 things or here are the 5 things or this is what you do because I know and I'm here to tell you and I understand the truth and you don't yet, but you will when you follow my method. That was a big part of it. And the other part was that at the time I first met you, you were right in the process of changing from Tiffany yoga to yoga medicine. And that's another really core part of the value set that I think shows leadership, the sense that it's not the Tiffany method or the Cruikshank method or Tiffany yoga. You've always been, since that point, about drawing in a community so that it's not just you and what you've experienced and what you know in your head. You're multiplying that by hundreds of teachers, all of whom have a different set of experiences and a different set of expertise that you can call on, that we each can call on when we have questions that come up. It kind of takes, I guess some people's perspective would be that it's taking power away from you and spreading it around. Like, why isn't it the Tiffany method? Tiffany's amazing. Why isn't it the Tiffany method? It's because you're always really clear that you're just one person with one set of knowledge and experiences, and that's not going to get you the whole way. That's not going to help every person every time.
Even if you spend every hour of every day studying, even just in one subject matter, you can only learn so much. And so no matter who it is, and you kind of see this on podcasts and on websites, like the people who we look up to, like at some point you realize like, oh, this person is an expert in everything. But how is that even possible?
How can that be?
You can't be. And yeah, they can have teams that help them research things, but there's only so much one person can know. That's the end of the story. And I think each of us has our duty to contribute to this world in some way. And for me, it's like realizing as my teaching grew and expanded and also seeing so many brilliant people like yourself being drawn to this work and sharing, like having shared experiences and ways of seeing things. To me, yoga medicine is not a style as much as like blending research with traditional practices. And
Mm-hmm.
so many people with a lot of experience with specific populations or demographics, or a lot of healthcare providers,
Mm-hmm.
physicians, surgeons, you name it. And so it was really cool to be able to say, hey, like, I don't have to know it all. I can't know it all. There's no
Yeah.
possible way. Like, I've got all these brilliant people around me. I need to bring them into the fold. And it was really cool because by that time, there were a lot of kind of core concepts with how I taught that these people kind of resonated with and had
Mm.
taken trainings from me. And so it kind of naturally evolved, as you saw.
Yeah, and I love
to
it because to start with, it's intimidating. I often say that I feel like the dumbest person in the room. And to begin with, that's a little bit intimidating to be looking around and going, oh my God, there are people who've been teaching for 20 years. There are PhDs. There are people with master's degrees. There are, people who do research. There are all kinds of super smart people. And I'm just a yoga teacher who used to work in marketing. And I was also, done stints of cleaning houses and, working in movie cinemas. But that's
But
also what
I
I love.
remember I spotted you. You were in one of our trainings and you kept raising your hand. And you had really great things to say
Sitting in
and
the front
share.
row
And I was
raising my
like,
hand. Yeah.
this one gets it.
This is a place that values geeks, I have to say. This is a place that values people who are like, well, my experience has been, what does that tell us? What does that mean? Yeah.
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 It was a
Yeah. I
long
love
time
it.
ago, but I still remember it just being like, I need to chat with her more. We need to bring her in more.
Don't
And
chat
it's
too
cool.
long because the crazy comes out, but, for a short time.
It's one of the things I actually miss most about the in-person trainings is getting to
Mm-hmm.
connect with people and meet people like yourself, people that we can start to work with and
Yeah.
support and maybe make trainings with and et cetera. Cause
Mm.
you don't really get that as much online, but when you're in person and, you're having meals together at retreats and things
Yeah.
like that,
For
you
me,
get to
it's all
know
about
people.
the lunch breaks, which sounds terrible because it isn't. The content is in the lecture portion, but the in-depth conversations with people where you find out where they're from and what they've been doing. And my
Right.
God, you've been working in the military for 20 years and you work with veterans. Oh, that's fascinating. What is that like?
Doing research, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You start to have conversations with people that you find out there's, however many people, 30, 50, 80 people here who have been doing incredible things their entire life. And you'd never know if you don't get a chance to have a
Hmm.
conversation with them.
I know. I always used to say that at the in-person too. Like a lot of the learning happens in the conversations at meals. Like, don't be afraid to
Mm-hmm.
branch out because like we had so many people who were doing really cool research
Yeah.
and teaching and, working with special demographics and learning interesting things. And it was what I always really loved highlighting is these people who had really interesting specialties and niches and like being able to share that because I can't have all those, you
Mm.
can't have all those, but we
Yeah.
can learn from it, which is
Yes.
cool, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. I would always come back with new ideas, not just from the lecture content, but from conversations with people. And that cross pollination is just so powerful, isn't it?
Right. And I feel
Mm.
like I just feel really lucky. I don't know how it happened. I mean, I think you draw people to you who are, who embody similar qualities and like-minded individuals. But I feel like our teachers at our trainings are such a unique breed of both really humble and really open-minded people, but also really intelligent and
Mm-hmm.
innovative and like go-getters,
Yeah.
curious people.
Oh, yes.
And
Hashtag humble geek, new t-shirt idea.
yeah, right. And not getting ahead of ourselves because it is one of those things we start to learn stuff, we start to learn things, and then we start to feel like we get it. But I think once you really start deeply learning about a subject, you actually start to realize how much you don't know.
Yeah. 100%. The more I learn, the less confident I am, the less certain I am about that. It's like,
Which
well,
is good.
yeah.
As long as you can be, open with people, I think about that. I think
Mhm.
there is leadership in that too.
Yes. Yeah.
Like we don't have to show up, with full overblown confidence to be a leader in our communities. I think the leadership sometimes is also in, the shared experiences and the curiosity and the
Mm.
intrigue and
I love
humility.
that, because I think the idea of leadership is a person standing in front of you pointing that way. This is where we're going. Whereas what you're suggesting is more a leader might be somebody standing next to you going, hey, what if we try going this way and see how it goes? Much more collaborative and open-minded. And, instead of having your back to somebody, you're standing next to them and, guiding them through the experience and helping them see signposts of their own internal responses. Yeah, that definitely
Yeah.
resonates a lot more to me than I'm the expert.
And to me, it goes against my original, introduction to yoga with, gurus and teachers. But to me, and my feeling of yoga at this point in my life, it really speaks to the essence of yoga, which is calling us into our own internal awareness and embodiment and
Mm,
mindfulness, which is really where the depth of the practice is, rather than just like blindly following,
mm,
which sometimes can work and be wonderful, to each their own, but has its limitations, of course.
yeah, and I think for yoga teachers who are listening, when you're presented with that really powerful, charismatic, um, decisive leadership figure, definitely for me that was alienating. I never saw, my charismatic original yoga teacher as something I could aspire to. That was almost like, well, obviously I'm not that. So I guess I won't be a yoga teacher. I guess I can't be a yoga teacher. Whereas I think there's room for more of us when it's a little more about exploration and inquiry. You can do that in so many different ways, but you can only
Right.
be, a personality driven, charismatic leader kind of one way, I feel like.
Well, and it is what you need. I know for me, studying with Patabi Joyce in my 20s
Mm,
was, I mean, he was more like a father figure. Really, it was that kind of relationship, and obviously a very deeply respectful relationship. And what I needed at the time. And I think there's a humility in that, like surrendering to the process and turning over your ego and just doing as you're told. And for me in my 20s, the discipline and dedication that it took was exactly what I needed,
mm,
which is different now. But, I think everything serves someone, I
yeah.
think it's just continuing to, inspect and listen to what it is that's really driving you and how it's really nourishing you and if it's really supporting you. And,
Mhm,
knowing that there's a lot of different options in yoga too. So you can
mhm,
always steer another way too. And there's no
yeah,
there's no wrong. It's not like you have to like put it down or like, you know what I mean? Like it served its purpose
yeah,
and now I'm moving on. And I think if you
yeah.
practice yoga long enough, that should happen several times over, probably. And that's wonderful.
I think
Yay.
so too. And I think that's one of the reasons why, sometimes you'll hear people talking about this is what I used to tell you, or this is what I used to believe, and here's my retraction and correction. Now here's what I believe. But I think those conversations don't come up anywhere near as much in yoga medicine, because you rarely come out saying this is how it is and this is what the truth is, and this is what you do. So it's not like 5 years later you have to say, well, now research suggests that that wasn't correct. You're always leaving room for research is great.
Maybe.
Evidence based is great. But remember, research is only answering one very specific question. And the scenario you're using it in might not be that specific question or that specific scenario. So be informed by it, use it as a jumping off point for investigation. But this is not the way. This is not the only way. This is not the one way. Be curious, be open minded.
And, I think a lot of those traditional practices have equal value. The hundreds or thousands of years we've been using them,
Hmm.
I think holds as much, if not a lot more weight too, than the like specific research protocols that prove one thing and one
Mm,
demographic, under specific conditions, probably, potentially. Um, but I think together, and I really believe, like, if Krishnamacharya was still alive, I really believe that he would be using these things too and
hmm.
incorporating everything that we have access to support the individual, to be able to keep evolving and supporting the person in front of us. And I think human needs are different than they were 100 years ago, 200 years ago, like
Yeah,
even
some
maybe
definitely. I
30
mean,
years
some
ago.
aren't, but some definitely
Yeah.
are. Yeah, there are things
Yeah.
that we deal with these days that we didn't have to then, and vice versa. Most of us aren't fighting off starvation like many people were hundreds of years ago. But social media creates its own kind of onslaught, and technology and devices, pluses
Yeah,
and
and the
minuses.
conditions we live in, like we're sitting in chairs more, staring at computers more. I think obviously there's some things that are similar, but there's also a lot of changing things. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think we just have to evolve and shift to meet the needs of the person in front of us and recognize that every style has, populations it's going to be really helpful for, every technique as
Mm.
well. And be open to a little experimentation, but also do no harm, of course. Have confidence from your experience
Yeah.
can be different than, ultimatums and cure-alls.
Yes.
This pose will cure your back pain, or
Yeah.
versus this pose can be really, in my experience, this pose can be really helpful for lower back pain. I mean, it does depend on what's going on, but, in a group class where I can't
Yeah.
speak to an individual, I've found this to be really helpful for the lower back, for strengthening lower back. And so I do think you can
Yeah.
broadly generalize, whether that's on social media or in group classes. But I do think you have to kind of be a little careful with your wording, and that's a
Leave
refinement that
space.
happens over time.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you brought that out, because you're talking about having some level of confidence from your experience. You're not just standing there going, "Well, I don't know, pretty much anything could be true. So who knows?" That's not helpful either. And we talked a little bit before I hit record about a podcast that I was listening to yesterday or the other day about the entertainment industry and streaming, and this reminded me of that way back in the early days of Hollywood, the studios were in charge and they made the movies that they wanted to make, and they were the things that you would go to see. End of story. Studio knows. And then streaming came along and it's all algorithm driven, and we're trying to make the stuff that you guys want to watch, and if it's popular, we'll make more of it. And I don't think either of those is a pathway to long-term success or satisfaction. And I can see the parallels to the yoga world of, I know how it is, I'm telling you how it is, this is my method, versus this is popular right now, so we're doing a bunch of this. True leadership, I think, is somewhere in the middle where, sure, you've got some experience, you've got some expertise to share, you're listening to what people need from you and what they're interested in, but you've got your own compass. You're following, you called it intuition before, things that you feel and that you believe in and that you've seen multiple enough times, or at least an approach of, this tends to be helpful, let's investigate and see. There's got to be something in the middle that guides you, that isn't just blind certainty and isn't just blind popularity, but a sense of, from my experience in this life, these are the values that I hold to be important, and these are the directions that I tend to be drawn in. Like, there's got to be something as your sort of your steering wheel or your rudder or your compass or whatever that thing is.
Yeah, and I think for me, visualization is a really big part of that. It's not always structured. It's not something like I strategize and outline and do specifically, but it happens, sometimes when I'm walking the dog, or when
Yeah.
I'm
Having a
meditating or
shower.
doing yoga. Yeah, or having a shower. But it is really important to me to be able to kind of, I don't necessarily have big, like 5 or 10 year plans, though I might consider it from time to time. It's kind of like, what's next? Like, what do people
Mm-hmm.
need from me? What am
Mm-hmm.
I really good at? And, for me, it also stemmed a lot from my work with patients, both ways. Like, one, I was using yoga with my patients and finding that it really helped them heal and recover faster. And then, I would take the things I was sharing with my patients, because I often give them, little things to do on their own. And, or like, I'd go through a phase of seeing a lot of people with rotator cuff injuries or things like that, and kind of bring that into my group classes as a way to
Mm-hmm.
kind of share some of these morsels with them. And so, I think that internal compass is continuing to reflect in structured or unstructured ways about, what your strengths are and what you really enjoy doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I didn't enjoy sports medicine, I definitely would have continued on
Oh
it.
God, the rotator cuff again. Here we go.
It's so intriguing to me, the fascia and the physical body and the anatomy.
Yeah.
But what is it that I really enjoy and am good at speaking to, that could be specific or very general. Maybe that's athletes, maybe that's rotator cuff, and depending on the day. And then like, what does the world need from me? So in a group class, how can I share that in a way that's relevant for everyone? Not everyone's going to have rotator cuff issues, but everyone has a shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all want to be resilient and durable and prepared for life now, as well as maybe as we age. And, there's a million different layers in between. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I think just having that internal compass, both on the broad spectrum of like goals, as well as like in my yoga classes,
Yeah.
is I think
Yeah.
really
In fact,
helpful. So you don't get lost in just the trends, but
yes.
you can also then create something that's really meaningful to you.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, Dana and I spoke about this in an episode on social media marketing. It was a Venn diagram that I think both of us have learned from you, that you just encapsulated really beautifully with, what do people need from me? What are people looking for from me right now? Which is that, what do I know? What am I good at? What expertise do I have? Versus, what I enjoy, what fills me up, what lights me up and gets me excited and has me digging into the research or testing things out on my mat, versus what does my community actually need right now? What are they looking for that either they're not getting or that they might get in a different way from me? And I think that internal compass means that you're not sitting in that camp of, I'm telling you how it is, and you're not sitting in that camp of, sleep is really big right now, I'd better do something about sleep. But you're being helpful in a way that also fills you up and inspires you and draws from your expertise and your experience. Love
Well,
it.
and I think listening to those things can be really helpful too, but it also helps keep you on track. And yeah, that I always think of that as a little triangle where those 3 points meet, is like
Yeah. The sweet
the
spot.
the sweet spot and the place
Hmm.
where we can be sustainable, because
Hmm.
we're filling a need within our communities, but we're also staying true to what's interesting and fulfilling to us.
Hmm.
And I think in any career, that's really important for stress resilience,
Hmm.
because if it's not interesting to me, it's not
There's
fulfilling
only
to
so
me.
long you can do it. Yeah, for sure.
And maybe I have something else, like tennis, like maybe there is something else for the people who really hate their jobs. Maybe they're a yoga teacher on the side, or they have other ways. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean we all have to have a dream job. Maybe
No.
it's finding those little tidbits within the job that we have that are interesting to us. Like, it can be just a small part of your job, or maybe it's finding a hobby or something else. But like, we all need some sort of fulfillment. I think that's
Hmm.
what helps neutralize the stress and anxiety and depression and
Hmm.
and internal health too, by how we relate to the world and how we engage with the world. So I do think on a very deep level, as far as it relates generally to our health and wellness, I think it's a really important thing for so much. So, and can
Agreed.
apply
Yeah.
to everything. So
People need to have some sense of purpose. It doesn't have to come from your job. And I'm glad that you say that. And we've had this conversation before, because, there are plenty of jobs that aren't going to draw as many, vocational people. You're not going to have your life's calling to whatever. Pick a job that you don't think of as being very exciting. I worked at cinema checkouts. I've worked in cleaning. This was definitely not my
right.
calling when I was cleaning nightclub toilets on a Saturday morning. But there are aspects of it that I could find satisfying. And especially walking
Right.
out at the end and looking around and going, I've made this place better. Let's forget the nightclub
Yeah.
toilets for a moment and think about a nice clean house. There's something you can draw, but that was not what gave me meaning in my life. It was elsewhere. I'm doing my job. I'm doing a good job of it. That's not where my passion and excitement lie. That's not my purpose, but I have that purpose somewhere else in life.
And I think finding that, like, we all go through phases of jobs we don't like, but even feeling
Sure.
that, like, I've improved other people's lives. I remember
Hmm.
someone telling me at some point that a yogi is someone who makes you know, leaves a place better than they found it. And it's just those little things of like, yes, I feel like I have improved someone's quality of life. I left this space clean, and for me,
Yes.
having a clean space is very
Oh, it's
important for my
amazing.
quality of life. And you see this with your dog too. Like, I know my dog, which he's right under my desk right now. That you're training dogs, and it's like purpose is so important for them
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
Like, they need to have their place in this world, and children. And
Hmm.
so we all need it.
Well, here's a question for you. Do you think teaching yoga is different to other jobs? Do you think there are different expectations of us as yoga teachers than there are for people who are contractors or house cleaning or working in a cinema or working in a supermarket? Do you think there are different expectations of us than of other
Yeah.
jobs?
Yes and no. I mean,
Mm,
I hope there's an expectation of compassion and empathy, of listening and caring for people. I think is a big expectation of setting aside our own needs, for those moments when we're working with other people. Not to say that we're not human too, and you
mm,
have to go to the bathroom or do something normal too, right? But um, it's a selfless service, really. And I think that's changed a lot. When I first started teaching yoga, it was like there was this assumption in, the early 90s of like you're giving up any attachment to money or
mhm,
fame or
mhm,
having a big lifestyle. And that's changed because there is possibility of that sometimes now.
mm,
But I still think at the heart of what we do, it really is ultimately a selfless service, and that's really what helps us to dissolve our ego and attachment to needing things to be a certain way,
yeah,
and really become immersed in the process with the person in front of us, which we have to manage too, because
yeah,
we don't want to take on other people's issues and problems. We want to be able to be there for them without taking that on,
mm,
and recognizing. I always like to make the analogy of it like it's like a plant. You can give it the best environment, the perfect soil and sun and water and all that stuff, and sometimes it won't thrive, and you can give it the worst and sometimes it will. And so as yoga
yeah,
teachers, we're there to like try and nurture the soil and the environment as best as possible, and recognize that it is out of our hands. So yoga teachers, I think, can draw. We are often empaths and can take that on, but I think it's also really important that we manage that,
mm,
but that it does require that. I think.
yeah. So you can see some sort
Yeah.
of overlaps or similarities both with people in education fields, educational professions, people in healthcare and caring professions. There are some sort of overlaps and similarities there. And I think you're absolutely right that it can draw people who really, really want to help. And that itself can become ego fueling. Like, I need to be there for them. I'm the only one. They need me. And you
Mm,
have to be really careful not to let that sneak in, because so many different approaches could help this person. You're not the one, you're not the only one, you're not the holder of the holy grail of information that will
mm.
save them. There are plenty of ways for them to get there. And like you said, they might do exactly the opposite of what you think is helpful. No sun, shitty soil, no water, and they might flourish. So do you know what I mean? You have to have good
Yeah.
intention, but not attachment. Your way might not be their way.
Yeah, I think I really like how you said that too. I think it's so important too. And it comes back to a lot of the tenets of yoga philosophy,
Mm,
like letting go of our ego,
hmm,
finding contentment. Like it is easy too, especially as you're doing more therapeutic work with people, to get so elated and excited
hmm.
watching some of the
It's
outcomes,
very
and
satisfying.
it can also fuel our ego. We can
For
start to
sure.
feel like I'm the beholder of the magic recipe of health
Yeah.
and wellness, and like you have to come to me and follow my ultimate plan.
Mhm.
Otherwise, whatever you're doing is inherently wrong or bad. And so,
Yes.
I think it does require that humility to go, wow, that was amazing. And for me, it's this awe of our humanness, our
Yeah.
ability for this body to be resilient. And sometimes it just needs those tiny inputs. And it's overwhelming. I just
Yeah.
have so much awe for how much the body can do. And so rather than like taking that on, which is great, it builds confidence. It helps me build
Mhm.
confidence to say I can speak from my experience. And in the past, this has been really helpful for certain people. Now, let's see. But
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
it's not like I'm the beholder of your
Yeah.
medicine. And
And I mean, people will literally say, "Oh, I look back then and you saved me." You can't take that stuff on board. You
right.
cannot, because often,
You got to put
often,
it back, right?
yeah.
Like
You
Well,
were
you did
just
the
at
work. That's usually my
exactly.
response.
You were at exactly the right point where, you'd hit rock bottom, you tried everything else. This was kind of the only way left. It would have happened whether I'd been there or not. And you're the one who did the work. You were there doing it day in,
Yeah.
day out,
And we did it
setting up good.
together.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Right? It's a
you can't take
journey.
that on. And
I
also,
think that's important too, because we get that, right? We get the people who want to put us up on the pedestal, and it makes me nervous. I don't like being on the pedestal. I'm
it's
human. Like,
high.
I
What if you
have all
fall?
my flaws, and I'm not perfect. I'm not a magician. I don't like
Mm,
instantly know what you need by looking at you. And
yes.
even with working with some people over time, there's complex situations that maybe
Yeah.
just need someone else's eyes. And so,
Yes.
I think whenever people try to put me up on that pedestal, it's kind of like, well, you did the work. We did it together. You gave me
Mm-hmm.
the information. We
Mm-hmm.
solved it together. You gave me feedback. So I think that's
Yeah.
an important one too.
Yeah, and you brought out something there too about not being human and not having flaws and somehow being all seeing and all knowing. And I do think there's pressure, I don't know where it comes from, for yoga teachers to be sort of aspirational, like not just to be teaching classes and sharing information, but you know, here's my morning smoothie. And I know you do have a morning smoothie. I don't. I have coffee with cow's milk. Don't come at me, people, but that's what I have. But yeah, there is this kind of this pressure that comes from somewhere that we should be somehow already finished the journey ourselves. Like I'm only eating, virgin organic greens and meditating for an hour every morning, and I never get traffic rage and I never get annoyed with my partner because I've already finished the journey. I've got it all sorted out. And nobody says that, but I do feel like that undercurrent sometimes comes through people's communication, and that too I think is really important not to fall into that trap, because you don't
Right.
have it sorted out. You haven't finished the journey. Maybe you feel really confident with where you are right now, but maybe in 10 years you can look back and
It's
go, I
always
had no
changing.
idea. It's always changing.
Well, and it's always changing, and I think our routines are always changing,
Mhm.
and people love the routine. What's your routine? And that's great. I think it can be fun because it inspires other people. But yeah, no one has it figured out. Like there,
Yes.
even all these like biohackers and things, like everyone's just trying to find the perfect, the magical recipe for them
Mm.
now. Which, once you figure out this decade, then you got to figure out the next one.
And maybe not even this decade, like this month, this season,
year.
this is,
Yeah.
this season of this
This
year, this is
season.
working really nicely for me. Is that going to work for
Right?
you? No idea. No idea.
I will say I've had green smoothies 90% of every day since like 2000.
And I've seen your morning smoothie, and it's not green, it's brown. That's how healthy it is. It's like
Even when I
a
travel, it's like a powder that I take.
and
The
also you
green.
do look a lot healthier than me. Nobody's ever asked me what my
That's
routine is.
not
And I'm
true.
totally fine with
That
it.
is not true.
But I'm
I
happy.
don't agree
I'm
with
happy
that.
with where I'm at. I don't have to be having a morning brown smoothie to to fill my cup.
Yeah, sometimes it is brownish. Yes.
Yeah.
It's usually green or brown or somewhere in
So
there.
packed full of nature.
Although we had honeydew and basil today, which was really good with vegetables, of course. But the honeydew, oh, it's honeydew season. It's my favorite.
Well, there you go. Pop that morning routine onto your Instagram, and that'll go down a treat. But yeah, do you ever
But
feel that sense that you should be sharing only aspirational content? Like I've got
no,
it sorted out and everything's fine.
it's just for me. It's just easier to post that stuff. I love the vulnerable moments. It's just
Hmm.
for me. It feels more forced
Yeah.
to try and like videotape a like it's so weird to me when I see that. I'm like, you just videotaped a vulnerable moment. Like, how is that even?
There's some part of you that was able to step back and go, this moment
No,
needs to be
I
captured and
can't
shared.
do
I've
it.
got it. Yeah.
I'm not an actor, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be. So, if I feel drawn to just talk on something that's real
Yeah.
to me in that moment, maybe. And I do love that. I love when people are vulnerable on social media. I think it's true. We tend to kind of it's natural. We tend to post the good moments and the things that we like and the things that we want to share. And I just think
Mm.
that's human nature, and that's fine. And a lot of people go to it to lift them up or to be inspired.
Mm.
But it can also have a backfire effect too, of like seeing everything as positive and feeling like your life doesn't match up. I think we all feel
Yeah.
that, when we go on social media. I feel it too. And then you have to go like, oh, okay, wait.
Hmm.
We're in
I'm
social media
comparing
world.
my normal day to somebody else's best day or
Best
best
day.
moment. Yeah. Yeah,
But
I think
I'm not great at like filming those I don't know. I do
this
love
for
it,
me
but
comes under the same heading of, to each his or her own. If that's
yeah.
your thing, if that's helpful to you, if people respond to that from you, great. No judgment. But that's definitely not my thing. I don't share much really personal content on social media at all because it's my platform as a teacher. And if I've got personal
Yeah.
stuff going on, I'm going to be talking to a person. I'll talk to my mum. I'll talk to my friend. I'll talk to my partner. I'll talk to Buddy the dog. He's a great listener.
Well, I think the humanness too, I think for me is like, I don't use, and no, like no offense to people who do. I think
Yeah.
if they do, they do. But like, I don't use a lot of filters. I don't even know how to put on makeup, much less wear it, like unless I'm at a photo shoot, which I haven't done for a long time. But I think just showing up as you are with those kind of flaws too
Mhm.
is feeling like you can show yourself as you are and not need to like be
Yeah.
different. And that's just a
Yeah.
personal thing for me. I've never liked makeup because of that. And I get why other people do, and I have no problem with makeup. I think it's
Yeah.
really beautiful for people who can use it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
But for
I
me,
think
it
I'd
always
like it
made me
more if I
feel
were
like,
better at it.
yeah, for me, it always made me feel like I had to do something to make myself presentable and good enough to be presented to the world. And like,
Mhm.
and then you take it off and you're like, oh, now this is who I am. It
Well,
felt like very strange to me.
here's my sister's favorite joke from when we were kids. Why do women wear perfume and makeup?
Oh gosh, what?
Because they're ugly and they smell bad. It's not funny, is it? But I mean, that's basically what you're saying, is that idea that I've got to somehow mask myself,
Right?
be acceptable.
And especially as we get older, this idea that wrinkles are an imperfection rather
Mhm.
than a sign of wisdom.
Yeah, it's a
I
sign you
think
haven't taken good enough care of yourself. It's nothing to do with wisdom or
or
having made
genetics, right?
genetics, or having made a lot of facial expressions in your day. It's a sign that you haven't
Or
exhibited good
having
self-care.
paid a lot of money for products and procedures,
Yeah, again, I
Or
feel like
even like
you can't fight your
like we get
genes.
this in MFR a lot. Like, how do we get rid of cellulite? Well, yeah, the MFR can help with that, but it requires you do it all the time. And for me, the thought of doing MFR every day to fight cellulite just sounds like this awful, demeaning thing that like
Yeah.
I'm not good enough as I am.
Just live
That I
somewhere
have to do
cold.
this.
Live somewhere cold and then no one sees your cellulite. This is definitely the social media clip for this episode, because people will be like, get
We
rid
all
of
have it.
cellulite with myofascial release. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah, that is a little sad, isn't it?
We all have it. I mean, I've worked on very slender supermodels in New York, and like the whole gamut of people and all their parts. I've seen their butts and their hips and by working on them with acupuncture and stuff. It's just like it's there.
Mm.
And obviously genetics are a big part of it too, and being sedentary, and there's a lot of different reasons, but like it's just human. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is I don't think men mind it as much as the women. I think it's more us
Yeah.
the judge.
I think that's true with a
ourselves.
lot of things. I think the standards that we take on, we seem to take them on willingly and put them on like weighted backpacks. I don't actually think are coming from the real world. I think they're coming from the virtual world. We take that in, we believe it's true, and I think in most cases it's just not true. I think we are pretty fine as we are.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think it's the spirit that shines through,
Mm.
and being comfortable with the wrinkles or the cellulite or whatever can be a really interesting thing, because your spirit changes when you're comfortable with it. And I think the way
Mm.
you interact with people is different. And not to say we don't, especially as females who go through hormonal cycles, not to say that we don't still fluctuate in our acceptance of these things.
Mm.
Maybe you caught me at a good time of the month. But that's an ongoing work as well. And I think
Mm.
back to what you initially were talking about was that I think that humanness is what connects us.
Yes.
And I think we've all experienced this with the people that we see who always look perfect and
Yeah.
gorgeous and have their shit together. Like, you know, you you kind of feel very separate from them versus the people who show up and actually tell you
Yeah.
about their day, your close friends who you can
Yeah.
see in their dirty clothes or their, nightgown or whatever,
No, I know
without their
exactly what
makeup.
this to me is the same as the pedestal thing. The person that always seems to have their stuff together makes me deeply suspicious because nobody has all of their stuff together. So they may look perfect, but when the moon is full, they are biting the heads off live chickens or something. There's
Right.
something creepy going on there because nobody's
And,
that together. No one has their stuff
and
together.
of
We're all
course
messy.
we got to pull ourselves together. Like I've taught yoga through some really shitty times in my life. I mean, I've taught yoga for
Yeah.
almost 30 years now. And so, you know, breakups, divorces, deaths, you name it. And I'm sure most teachers have. And, again, it comes back to that, like, okay, this is about me showing up to do the best I can to help other people. And it's
Yeah.
almost comforting, right? Because I can put that aside
I feel
and
like there
now
are
show up
phases
for
where
them.
you can't. Definitely for me, I've had times where I've had to take a few days off because I'm not capable of
Yeah.
speaking without crying. You've got to know your limits. But there
Sure.
are phases where it is really helpful actually to just put your feelings aside for a moment and to be there for other people. And when you're at that phase in whatever you're dealing with, it can be as helpful for you as it can be for your students to be like, I'll come back to all of that when I'm done. For now, I'm just here for the people in the room and
Absolutely. And I
yeah.
love that you said that. And yes, absolutely. Like give yourself the space to do that. I just know for myself, like I've been in situations where I've traveled around the world and there's 200 people there and I'm ready for a conference and I've,
Yep.
breaking down for whatever personal reason. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a
You
long
can't
time.
always
I've had a
back out.
much more stable life, I think, since I've been with my husband, maybe, but and gotten
Thanks,
older
Forrest.
and less, all over the place. But I think we all go through that. It's just
Yeah.
human. And I do think, yes, there's a time for us to take a break and to step back and have our own personal space. And
Mm.
sometimes we're forced to
Yeah.
work
Sometimes you
through that
can't.
for some reason. And it allowed me to really step into that selflessness because,
Mhm.
there is a presence of like being fully present for someone else. You got to come back to your shit when you're done, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
go away. It's not like you're avoiding it. It's still
It's
there.
waiting in the car.
Right? But
So
it
I
can be
guess
a breath. Yeah.
to sort of summarize what we're saying here is basically, do you want to lead aspirationally? Like maybe there are aspects of your life where you are sharing the things that have been really helpful for you and you're sharing them in the hope that they're helpful for other people. But you want to do that in the spirit of here I am as a person, not I've finished the journey and here are the 10 steps I took to achieve this perfection, but here's what I'm working with at the moment, or here's what I find helpful, or here's what I'm hearing a lot of at the moment, and this is the advice I have to give, but just to share from that place of I have the issues same as you do. Maybe they're different issues, but I don't have it all sorted out. I don't have it all figured out. Maybe you and I aren't posting videos of ourselves crying. Don't think to get the phone out in time, but we're sharing some humanity, some vulnerability, some imperfection, some places where we're still very much trying to figure things out or on the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And,
Mm.
I think speaking from that humanness is great. And it's a balance. I mean, I've been in classes where teachers kind of have overshared, right? Where you're like,
Yeah.
this feels like a therapy session for you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rare. I don't feel like I've seen that much anymore. It's been a long time, but um, I think it needs to ultimately be about the people we're showing up for. But
Mhm.
when we bring our own perspective and humanness into it, I do think it can be more rewarding and less draining, less feeling like we have to put on a show and be a certain thing, and more like
Mhm.
we're there to show up for these people and support them. And remembering that first and foremost, our work is a selfless service. So, if you are going to teach 200 people or 1,000 people or 10 people, there's always this reminder, because I think unless you're an actor, which there are a lot of actors that are drawn to teaching yoga and they do well in yoga, but for me, I'm not an actor and I'm not good at acting. And so it really, and I get nervous speaking in public. Like I'm the person that, if you go to a teacher, if I went to another teacher training and you have to like stand up and say your name, what you do, like my heart's beating out of my chest. Like I just say my name, like I'm not a natural public speaker. And so for me, it's this moment before I go in or to teach or whatever of like, why am I here? What's my purpose? What am I hoping to share with these people, to remember that we all have something to share. You don't have to be an expert, but we know more than the people we're teaching. And so it's this moment of like, here's my thing to share. This is a selfless service. I'm here to do my best and to help these people as much as I can. And the rest,
not in your hands, not under your control.
Yeah. And then I can just enjoy it. Right.
Yeah.
And it is productive and sustainable and a supportive community where we're all in it together. So
yeah, I love that. And I think that's a really nice way to kind of start summing it all up, as you don't have to be the expert. You don't have to have multiple PhDs in a topic, because, there are people who spend their entire lives diving into something and still don't reach the bottom of everything.
And don't wait, because it'll never happen, right?
Yes.
Like if you wait till you have all the information, it'll be forever. I mean, I still question myself, and I think that's an important thing to do. Keep questioning yourself. Keep digging deeper. Keep investigating in your own body, with your students, in the research, in the traditional literature, like don't wait.
I think that's wonderful.
Sorry.
No, that's exactly it. Is you don't have to be the expert to have some experience or expertise to share. And when you have that purpose front of mind, it does put a lot of the other stuff to one side. And that's really what we're suggesting as the form of leadership that we can have as teachers, of sharing something that we've found helpful or that has been useful for us, in the hope that it's helpful for other people, and just leaving a lot of space around the rest of it.
Yeah. And I think, we're both a fan of the leadership that lifts everyone up.
Yeah.
Like the leadership that's not about this power differential of lifting me up higher and you down lower, but the leadership that lifts all of us up. It helps all of us learn together. It helps all of us then go and support our communities. I think that's the most powerful leadership, not the one where, it's a big magic trick or like a big podium or something,
and it's much more realistic, because if you're teaching 10 people, all of those 10 people are going to know more about a whole host of things than you do. You just happen to know more about the thing that you're teaching right now. So if that doesn't keep it all in perspective, I don't know what does. Anything else you want to kind of wrap up with or leave people with in terms of leadership in the yoga world?
No, I love that last bit of like, leadership lifts us all up.
Yeah.
Good leadership.
I think so too. Oh, love it.
Thanks for bringing the conversation. I think this was really your direction and clarity too, which kind of helped me go, oh, this is, it's nice to have an outsider's perspective to help you clarify the things that you do. So
this is what I've been doing for years. Nice that people are noticing.
I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
Yay. Yeah. Well, hopefully people have taken something from it. You don't have to be the all-seeing, all-knowing. You don't have to be the super charismatic. You don't have to be the super popular. You just have to be you, sharing from what you know and what you've seen and what you've experienced in a spacious way. Here it is. Maybe you'll find it helpful. That can be enough for you to be a leader in your classroom or in your community.
Perfect ending. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for everyone who joined us. And we look forward to seeing you next time. I think that's like the perfect note to end on. It's like a mic drop. Next
time. Thanks, Tiffany.
That was great.
Thanks for listening to Yoga Medicine. If you like the show, please be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you got something out of this episode, please spread the word and share it with a friend. You can find more information, articles, trainings, and classes at yogamedicine.com, or check us out on social media as Yoga Medicine. You can also email us at info@yogamedicine.com. Thank you for being a part of our Yoga Medicine community. We look forward to seeing you again. The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.